Welcome to our second debate on the 7Ds: debt, democracy, demography, digital, defense, decarbonization, and de-risking globalization. Today we will focus on the issue of defense. We are having this debate in a very special moment because there's war in Europe. Russia has aggressed Ukraine. There are millions of refugees, and all the citizens fear the outcomes very clearly. It's my pleasure to welcome today Benedetta Berti, who is Head of Policy Planning at Nato, and our President in the Martens Centre, former Prime Minister of Slovakia, Mikulas Dzurinda.
Thank you.
Maybe we can start with the following. I've tried to outline a little bit the situation. What do you think in this situation are the biggest challenges? Benedetta Berti.
I think when it comes to European security and defense, I think some of the main obstacles are well known. We know that there's still, even though European allies are investing more in defense, we still know that there is a gap, this famous 2% that we have pledged to reach. Not all of us are there, and we need to get there. We talk often about the fragmentation of the European defense industry. So we know that there's practical obstacles, but I think the most important one when it comes to having this discussion about European defense and security is really the mindset. And that's the most important one. What I mean is, for many decades, I think as Europeans, many of us took a little bit of a vacation from history. We took our defense for granted. We took our security for granted. We need to rebuild that muscle, not just in terms of our armed forces and capabilities, but also in terms of strategic culture. And that starts with recognizing exactly what you said. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine is a threat to our security, to our prosperity, to our democracies, and that it affects not just Ukraine as a country, but also all of us. So I think it starts a lot with those discussions.
Mikulas Dzurinda.
Well, as Madame Berti has already said, the Ukraine matters, and matters a lot. On the other hand, I feel that we face more challenges in Europe in these days and in the globe. The second one is the event which has been mentioned by you at the beginning. It is the horrendous attack of Hamas on Israel. We should look at the issue in a wider context, in the context of the Middle East, hoping that not beyond. And last but not least, there is also Africa, especially in the north, with some negative development. I am thinking and speaking about different activities of different terrorist groups in Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, which are killing people, which are pushing people out from these countries. And these activities are causing a lot of difficulties also for domestic people, but also on us, especially when it comes to legal migration, but also illegal immigrations. So we should be aware of that. We used to rely on the United States all the time. Now I feel that the time is coming when we, the EU, are invited to shoulder bigger responsibility to address these challenges.
That's a very interesting point. You're making a connection here also between war, defense, but on the other hand also the issue of migration. And it's true that Russia's aggression against Ukraine provoked millions of refugees coming out of Ukraine, going to Poland, many other countries, Germany. But it was already true before in Syria, because it was Putin that bombarded cities like Aleppo, and therefore has the responsibility for mass migration in 2015 and 2016. So what we sometimes believe, here's internal policy, there's external policy, there's defense, in fact is very closely interwoven. And personally, I believe that we have seen in the Ukraine war that NATO and the European Union have become complementary. What NATO can do, the European Union cannot do, but what the European Union can do very often NATO cannot do in times of the weaponization of everything. So when looking a bit into the future, how could we develop the European Union contribution to defense, enabling our member states also to play a stronger role, maybe?
Yeah, you are very right, Klaus, that there are some certain areas in which maybe we can do more as Europeans. I very often think about the future of Ukraine. What could be done, what should be done, how to organize, let me say, the final arrangement after war is ending. And I feel very strongly, by the way, I was reading also the same from the side of Anders Fogh Rasmussen, that maybe one day it will be necessary to deploy international troops in Ukraine to keep the final arrangement alive. So in this respect, I feel that maybe our European soldiers or troops will be more operational and accepted in Ukraine than American soldiers. Because this is very easy still to misuse the activity of the United States, especially under such heavy propaganda as we follow coming from Russia, from the Kremlin. The same can be applied also vis-à-vis the countries of Sahel or North Africa. It is evident that maybe one day it will be necessary to help democratically elected governments in this country to get rid of these terrorist groups and to help these countries to organize a peaceful settlement and the future. In this respect, I feel that it is really a complementary issue to build and develop our European defense and security under one umbrella as equally strong and full-fledged European pillar of transatlantic alliance.
Yes. So you think Europeans need to take more responsibility, especially in their immediate environment. How do you look at this, Benedetta Berti?
Very complimentary. I would say, well, first of all, it's absolutely true. I think that we are in the most dangerous and complex security environment for generations. And that means that when it comes to burden sharing between European allies and North America, I think the need is greater than ever. We need to strengthen the European pillar of Nato because there are so many crises at the same time. And so we do need, I think, as Europeans, to spend more on defense, to acquire the capabilities that we need to be able to sometimes be first responders when it comes to crisis in our own neighborhood. I think when it comes to NATO-EU cooperation, there's a really important role on the EU side also to support the development of capabilities, aggregate demand, contribute to boost defense industrial capacity, which is something that we really need so that the Europeans can have the defense spending and the capabilities to shoulder this common responsibility for European and transatlantic security. And then I think there's also a lot that we can do together when it comes to the quote-unquote softer side of security. For example, the issue of resilience to me is incredibly important. We know, as you rightly said, that everything's being weaponized. We saw how President Putin used energy dependence to blackmail us. So the issue of how do we build a common European and transatlantic resilience against coercive tactics by authoritarian countries, being Russia or China, I think that's really, really important when it comes to ensuring our long-term security.
Yes. We are, Mikulas Dzurinda, we are making a number of concrete proposals in the 7Ds for sustainability on defense. We believe we need an internal market for defense products. We believe we need production capacity, as you have also said, transport, logistics. We need to fill some strategic gaps, maybe in the area of intelligence, satellites, transport capacity. What do you think should be addressed first? I can maybe also add Michel Barnier's proposal, the Civil Protection Service, which has not been implemented.
Everything which have been mentioned by you has a logic and is important. And I am also a friend of a gradual, step-by-step approach, which was indicated in your sentences. But I'd like to stick to continuity with what has already been said by me. This is why I like a proposal to creating a coordinated land presences concept that will enable the EU to contribute to non-EU countries' crisis management operations flexibly. Because, as you mentioned earlier, one day it will be necessary to be more operational with our forces, with our troops, to increase our military mobility. It is very tangible, very practical. And I was pretty happy to notice a week ago that there was the first big military exercise in the south of Spain with the participation of 2,800 troops from 9 EU countries. This is something which should be taken into account. And I strongly believe that Mr. Putin is not very happy if he is coming to realize that the Europe wants to be not only wealthy, but also stronger, a reliable partner to the United States. This is the case. In my eyes, this is very, very important proposal in our document.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we hold the view that in the East, Putin tries to re-establish empire, whereas in the West and in the center, we try to build a democratic European Union of citizens and states, built on the rule of law, freedom to join, freedom to leave, as we have seen in the British case. So these two rules for the 21st century are in competition. And we try to protect Ukraine and Moldova and also the countries in southeastern Europe from violence and from aggression. Benedetta Berti.
Well, there were a lot of very good concrete proposals, so I will just echo the emphasis on military mobility. I really think it's very important. Sometimes, from a NATO perspective, we're in the middle of the largest reinforcement of our collective defense, of our deterrence and defense posture since the end of the Cold War. We have deployed from 4 to 8 multinational battle groups on our eastern flanks, reinforced the eastern flank, adopted for the first time since the end of the Cold War regional defense plans that really link forces to territory and really enable us to deter and defend credibly against what the alliance feels is the main direct threat, Russia today, but also terrorism. And the issue of military mobility may seem technical, but it's key to enable this posture because we need to be able to move those troops across Europe. We need to have the right regulatory framework. We need to have the right physical infrastructure. We need to have the right digital infrastructure, including 5G. We need to have the right civilian satellite for communication. All of these issues are really important to actually go from plans to reality. And that's a really important area, I think, for NATO-EU cooperation, because as NATO, we have the requirements, but does the European Union, well, you have the regulatory tools to look at the digital physical infrastructure, see that it complies, and you also have the funding mechanism that can incentivize member states. So I think it's a really good area for cooperation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And one of the first things the new commission to be elected in 2024 has to do is to think of the funding for the next 7 years. So they will have to make a proposal how much money should go into transport and logistics so that we can really help the Baltic countries in case something should happen over there. They have to decide whether we get something like an EU DARPA, like the Americans are having, where research can be funded both for civilian and military purposes. So the European Union has a lot of assets, besides also the regulatory. It could invest in making Europe a safer place. If we look for outside Russia, what are the other potential threats you can see, Mikulas Dzurinda?
I am not very happy to tell this, but it is in my head, and I believe that we need to talk about China and its role in the globe, but also in our neighborhood, in the Western Balkans, in Africa, in the Middle East. I want to be a bit provocative, so I realize, I follow the development in Gaza in these days, or in Israel. We have on one side Hamas and Hezbollah. The link to Tehran and Iran is evident. We have Russia, and at the end of the day, we have China, which is playing silently with money and with its political influence. So this is a challenge for us, and I realize that we can rely on the United States still, mainly when it comes to our approach or attitude toward China. But at the same time, we should be aware of the fact that the center of gravity will gradually move from the United States on the EU in such cases as we spoke earlier, Ukraine, the Middle East, the north of Africa. But China matters and will matter a lot as military power, as economic power, and technological power. We should be aware of that and to deepen our relationship with the United States, also in economy, also in the area of technologies, 5Ds and other technological areas.
Strong agreement. I think that's when I look at, of course, right now we are rightly focused on Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. We look at Russia's broader set of destabilizing behavior in our neighborhood. Of course, the situation in the Middle East is of high concern, the threat of terrorism, the highly destabilizing and malign influence of Iran. So all of these issues, I think, it's really right that we focus on them. And I also very much agree that if there is one trend that is reshaping the world, is the growth of strategic competition. And we are talking about China's role as our strategic competitor. We're seeing the military modernization. We're seeing the coercive tactics. We're seeing the attempt to create strategic dependencies and then leverage them. So when you put all of these tactics together, I think it's very clear that we need to be able to protect ourselves, able to improve our resilience, and really able as a transatlantic community to stand together, because the China challenge is so large, is so big, that I think it's one that not Europe alone, neither the US alone can really tackle. So it's a really strong case for transatlantic unity. So I will also really put the emphasis on how do we prepare for this challenge, which we know is not just coming, it's here already.
Yes, and beyond the 7Ds and the defense chapter, where we have 25 proposals on what to do practically, our President Mikulas Dzurinda has asked us to work more intensively on the area of defense. So we are developing a concept which is called the European Defense Pyramid, which is trying to bring together how can the European Union help to strengthen its member states and indirectly then also NATO in the challenges which are ahead of us. And we hope that in the next 2-3 months we have something available elaborated by 10 leading experts in the field. So I would like to thank you very much for this debate, for this contribution. Also ask our viewers to comment, to actively participate, to download the 7Ds for sustainability, 175 proposals for the next legislature. And thank you very much. Enjoy the video. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.